Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Troy Grable, your host of Teamalytics Leadership Live Coaching Series. Each month, our goal is to break down a leadership topic and have an expert in team and leadership coaching share their perspective and their wisdom about the month's topic. This month, we're talking about aggressiveness in your corporate culture, and I'm super excited to have one of our senior coaches, Tim Gardner, on the show today. Tim, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hey, Troy, it is my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let me share a little bit about Tim. Tim, for over 30 years, has been helping people discover their best lives and relationships. In my opinion, this man is a jack of all trades. He has served as a teacher, a coach, a psychotherapist, an author, a keynote speaker, a conference leader. He's served on the school board as a member and also the president. And he's been a marriage and family counselor. But best part of it, for the past 7 years, Teamalytics has had the blessing of Tim being on our team as a senior coach and leadership development consultant. And one thing I like about Tim, at the end of the day, he wants to lead and love people well. And I think honestly that really blends right into our conversation today, Tim. You know, how do you lead and love people when we all know we have to have aggressive behaviors, and it's still a fabric of high performing teams, but we also know that it can be taken too far and it can be equally destructive. So I'm going to have Tim share a little bit what aggressive behaviors are critical for teams to possess to be high performing, and explain why it is essential to focus on developing high performing teams and what outcomes you can expect when you invest in building a balance of aggressiveness within your culture. So let's dive in. But first, I'd love for you, Tim, just take a couple of minutes, share your background with our audience today. How did you learn about Teamalytics, and man, how did we get the honor of having you on our team?
Well, hey, I appreciate all that, Troy. I think I have the fun story in the company, and because I met Flippin, our founder, about 40 years ago. He was running a small little counseling center in College Station, Texas, and I was entering my freshman year of college at the University of Texas. So we're already rivals, but that's and I was figuring out what I wanted to do. Career-wise, even education-wise, as I was going into college, and I thought about going into psychotherapy and counseling as a career. And a friend of mine knew Flip and said, "Hey, you know what? You ought to drive down and spend a little time with Flip. He's been doing this for a while. He knows all about it. Just ask him some questions." So I did that. Flip graciously gave me some time in his calendar, and I drove from Austin to College Station and hung out with him for a while and just really talked about the field and ended up going into it. It was very influential for me. Undergraduate, graduate school, all the way through until I was a licensed mental health counselor and spent a lot of years on doing that. Fast forward to where I was the director of leadership and culture for a big home services company. We got a new CEO. I was tagged with finding him an executive coach. He'd never been a CEO before, and we wanted him to have some coaching. So I went searching, and I still don't even know where I came across it, but I came across a list of the top 50 executive coaches in the country, and Flippin's name was on it. And I go, there can only be one of those guys. There can only be one Flippin. So I tracked him down, ended up hiring the company to come into the organization that I was working. I got to meet a whole lot of the players, that were a part of the Teamalytics family. And, through conversations over the coming years, it was probably 3 or 4 years from when I first met Flip that I ended up joining the team full time. So yeah, that's the circular story of it all. But it's fun that we go back that far, and we both kind of had a similar. We both started in the counseling side and have brought that into the coaching side. So.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Tim, you've been leading and coaching leadership teams to achieve greatness for 30 years. And I'm for certain that you have a firsthand perspective on our subject today, and that's the balance of aggressiveness in your culture. But before we really get into that, could you give our listeners and a good understanding of what we mean by aggressiveness and what organizations face when they don't invest in developing a balanced culture of aggressiveness.
Right. That's good. And you talk about having a firsthand experience with this or front row seat. It's also because this has been one of my constraints, especially early in my life. So it's one that's near and dear to my heart, and one that I've realized that we need to address, and we can't just we can't just put it off as our personality. I used to say that, oh, I'm just a hothead. That's who I am. I'm just like you. Gotta meet my dad. My dad's a real hothead, and I would blame those aggressive behaviors on that, and realize what no. So to your question. As with all of the team analytics behaviors that we talk about, the question of is aggressiveness good or bad? And the
Right.
answer is yes. The answer is simply yes. The definition is the tendency to be aggressive and escalate. The key words are to push back and escalate. So at its core, it's about being competitive. Same question, is being competitive good or bad? Yes, it's great to be competitive, but if we aren't competitive enough, then our voice doesn't get heard. If we're too
Right.
competitive, we take things too far, and that's kind of the definition of of when aggressiveness becomes a problem, is when somebody takes that aggressiveness and takes it too far. They take that desire to win and take that into a disagreement. You and I are having a disagreement, which disagreements are healthy. Disagreements are wonderful. We should have lots of disagreements in the workplace where we're working towards a solution. But if I'm highly aggressive, all of a sudden I have to win this. I have to be right and you have to be wrong. And so I begin to create all sorts of unhealthy team behaviors when I do that. One reason people don't like aggressiveness is because it gets defined as conflict, and there's a lot of people that don't like conflict. And
Right.
if you ask people why they don't like conflict, they will picture the person that we're talking about right here. That's highly aggressive. They're the person that flares up, raises their voice, gets punitive with people that disagree with them. Again, it's okay to want to win, but they have to win at all costs. They have to win at the expense of other people losing. And that's when aggressiveness becomes unhealthy. Now, we look on the lower side, and we don't always coach people that are low aggressiveness to be more so. But the problem with being lower aggressive, there's lots of strengths: more humble, more cooperative, more conciliatory, more of a team player. But the potential negative is that your voice isn't being heard. And I tell people almost every day, hey, one of the things your company pays you for is your opinion. So you need to get your opinion out there. And sometimes lower aggressive people avoid doing that. But again, the higher aggressive people, they need to. We want to get them to understand how important it is for them to dial it down a little bit, because the aggressiveness, when you talk about culture, Troy, I mean, an aggressive culture, that aggressive person just makes things uncomfortable. Yeah,
Right.
I think when I first started graduate school, many years ago, 1982, and I was starting graduate school, studying to be a counselor. And every Saturday morning, we would play basketball together. A lot of the students, just for a little bit of exercise and stress relief and everything else. We'd local church, we'd go play basketball. So these are all people that are like studying to help people. These are all people who are in the people business. And I still remember this one Saturday morning. There was one guy on our team who he was really good. It wasn't me, but he was just really, really good. And he was just running circles around this one guy on the other team who was this great big kind of football player type. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the game, he just grabs him. The big guy grabs the guy who's doing all the scoring and throws him off the court. I mean, I'm not making that up. He just throws, and the place just went silent. Everybody froze, like, okay, this competition just went a little bit too far, and everybody got uncomfortable. That's the aggressiveness going out of control that we're talking about.
Right.
We get called into a company. One last quick thought is, I was called into a company a couple of years ago. Team Analytics was, and I was the consultant on the case. And I was told by the president that there's this one person who half of the team just kind of go, I'll call him Joe. Half the team he's highly aggressive, just say, oh, that's just Joe. He gets mad and yells and has to have his own way. The other half of the team's getting ready to quit because of Joe. So there's the problem with the Joes if they go unaddressed. Well, he's making us money. We don't care. Well, that's a problem, because that creates an atmosphere of where the other half of the executive team is like, if we don't fix this, I'm quitting.
Right. So one of the keys, as we know, of a great leader is their ability to you know, build strong, healthy, high producing teams. Um, Tim, you've led them and you observed teams and organizations who have invested in transforming their companies to becoming high performers. You know, what are, if you will, the right ways to insert an aggressive behavior with inside of your company?
It's a great question, and the key is balance. As we've said, aggressiveness can be good or bad. Competitiveness can excuse me, competitiveness, if I can say the word, can be good or bad. It's the balance. You know, is the desire to win. Okay, absolutely. You know, the desire to win, the desire to compete in the marketplace, to be better than our competitors. That's all great.
Mhm.
It's that balance. So we need to be able to, or to speak personally, I need to be able to assert my opinion while also being able to listen to and validate other people.
Mm.
I need to be able to defend my position as well as thoroughly consider the opinions of other people. I need to be able to be passionate about a topic, to share my passion as to why I think this is important, and not let that passion turn into anger or defensiveness or put downs or name calling. You know, I need to make sure that if I'm the highly aggressive person, I'm giving other people the chance to speak, and that I'm making sure that I listen to and validate those opinions. And so, and even more, sometimes I need to be open to realizing that their opinions are better than mine, and their solutions are better than mine. So the right way to be aggressive is the desire to work, the desire to win, and to work in a way that moves us towards winning, but not at the expense of relationships, not at the expense of turning something that could have been win-win into a win-lose. And that goes back to your question that I don't think I thoroughly answered a while ago. Why should companies invest in this?
Mm.
That's why. So we can get to a situation where lower aggressive people can be heard, higher aggressive people can dial it back a little bit, so that they're able to be part of a team that comes up with a team solution. Excuse me.
Awesome. Can you give our listeners an understanding of what you've seen in your experience working with organizations, like before they started that transformation process towards a balanced culture of aggressiveness? You know, what were some of the desired outcomes, and what did you witness as they kind of moved through that journey, as they got closer to those outcomes?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of times people engage with team analytics simply because they want their teams to perform better and move ahead and you know, become that high performing elite team that does all those things that high performing elite teams do, which is what we're all about at Team Analytics. Uh, but it's not unusual for us to be brought into a problem situation, and you know, I try to avoid using superlatives like it's always this way, but very often it's because there is some aggressive, there's high criticality, high confident, low nurturing, low self-control, high aggressive people that are just causing problems.
Mhm.
And you know, they're just creating situations where it's not, I mean, to use a modern term or a current term that people use a lot, it's not psychologically safe. You know,
Mhm.
psychological safety is huge. A lot of conversations about it today. That's the ability to admit you made a mistake, admit you need help, admit you're not the smartest person in the room, admit somebody else is better at something than you. Well, if you're, well, I'll go to an example in my head with, you know, keeping it anonymous enough. So we'll call this one Joe too, just to keep it together. We were called in one company where Joe was a senior, no, he's COO, as a matter of fact, and he was all those things I just said: highly aggressive, high criticality means nobody could do anything right. Low nurturing, wasn't building relationships. Super high confidence, thought he was right all the time. Low self-critical, same thing. And if somebody was wrong, he had no problem just dressing them down in front of everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah, and matter of fact, a new CEO came in, and CEO hadn't been there for a couple of months when he saw this guy. I mean, he just screaming, hollering, cussing at somebody in the middle of the office space, you know, who had done something wrong. In his mind, had done something wrong, had made a mistake. So CEO called him in and said, "That's your one. You don't get another one. There's no three strikes here. You get two. The second time you're done." And as I got involved, the culture was scared to speak up. Culture was scared to say anything. Culture was scared to challenge him because it would always end up this way. Uh, Unfortunately, this was one of those situations where, as we looked at the data and pointed it out and said, this is how people feel about you, he just justified it. This is why I've been successful. Well, the second time came around, he did it again, and he got fired. And he told the CEO, "I thought I was bulletproof. I didn't think I'd ever get fired." So when he left, the culture changed completely, because the aggressive one who always had to win every conversation, did not make it safe to fail at all, was no longer there. So very often teams have a balance here. I work with a team. I was with them a couple of weeks ago. There's 45-ish people on the team. 6 are low or on the lower side of aggressive. 6 are higher. Everybody else is within the range. So that's a typical mix we see on a team. Okay. So trying to work the lower ones to speak up a little more, but more importantly, the ones that are higher on the aggressive side, to tone it down, to take a more team-oriented approach, really becomes the goal. So as we get involved with teams, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to the point where high-performing teams can compete without taking it too far. High-performing teams include everybody. Everybody's voice matters. High-performing teams are open to everybody's opinion and working towards a win-win solution. And so we have to tap down the aggressive behaviors for that to happen. And it can be done. I've given a couple of scenarios where the person who was highly aggressive was asked to leave the company. Again, there are other people that once they see the data and we begin to have the conversation, I had one guy tell me, "I don't want to be that guy." I'm going, "All right, good. Because right now you are that guy. You're that guy who always has to be right, that everybody thinks is a pain to work with. So let's work on you not being that guy, dialing it back, figuring out a way to engage in the team in a healthier way." And so that's it's getting to that environment where people can speak up and not worry about getting yelled down in the process.
Right. I love that saying, psychological safety, because it is a true piece that we go through in our work environments. How safe are we with the people around us? But Tim, I can't thank you enough for the time that you spent with us today. I do like to end with our rapid fire closing questions and really try to have some fun with this last part. But real quick, what's your favorite leadership behavior to coach?
The first correct answer is whichever one the person I'm coaching wants to work on. Okay.
Okay.
But then the other ones are the ones that I've had to deal with myself, my own constraints. Again, I was called a hothead back in my early 20s more than once, and I finally had to come to that. It was that emotionally compelling reason we talk about. I finally had to decide: do I want to go through life being known as a hothead? I wasn't married yet, didn't have kids yet, and was like, no, I don't want to, because my aggressive behavior was too high. And so realizing, when I run into people like that, I think this is a challenge. Sometimes people think, oh, that person will never change, like the illustration I gave earlier. No, people can. They just have to have that emotionally compelling reason to do so. Right. Something else I have fun with is the low need for order. I'm very low need for order. I still am, but I've learned some very nice skills and processes. A phrase I picked up from a former employer was, systems are the solution. So helping people that are low need for order find the systems that work and make them more effective. So those are really different behaviors to like to work on, but low need for order and higher aggressiveness. So,
what about your favorite productivity hack for leaders?
I tell leaders they should have a closed door policy. And what I mean by that is, I'll have an open door. I'll have times when you walk in, talk to me, ask me questions, how can I help, and so forth. But there will be times when my door is closed. And when my door is closed, unless the building is on fire or there truly is an emergency, please don't interrupt, because I'm trying to focus and get stuff done. There's so much research out today on the problem of lack of or inability to focus, and the cost of interruptions in the American workplace, ranging from $500 billion to $1 trillion because of just the interruptions that happen, and so on and so forth. So when people complain about their inability to get things done and to move things down the line quick enough, I go, you need a closed door policy where you can take time to focus. Some other people call it monk mode. We used to call it calendaring. Then we called it time blocking. Then we called it time locking. And now we call it monk mode, that ability to say, leave me alone. I'm getting some work done. So anyway, closed door policy, I think, is important for people to have.
Awesome. All right, last rapid fire. Your best leadership advice you've ever been given.
Yeah, and it wasn't even really specific advice about being a leader. It was from a professor I had in my early graduate school days. He said, as you get older, you have a choice. You can be the person who has thinner skin and a harder heart, or who has thicker skin and a softer heart. In other words, you can be that person who's easily offended and, blames everything on other people, and you have this hard heart towards other people and their issues or problems, or you can be this person who's thicker skinned, more resilient, and just really continues to care for people. You said at the beginning, how I like to evaluate my days. Simple question: did I love people well today? And there are days I have to look at the mirror at the end of the day and go, nope, didn't do very well today. But am I? So I think that thicker skin and softer heart towards people, I'm old. I don't need to judge people. I don't need to judge situations. I need to just try to love and care for people. I have a choice. I can have a thicker skin and softer heart, or thinner skin and harder heart. So I'm working on the thicker skin, softer heart side of things.
That's awesome. Well, that is great advice. I like that a lot. Tim, again, thank you so much for joining me on Leadership Live. I think that psychological safety is a great way to step into talking about aggressiveness and the level of safety your team has in your environment. So thank you for bringing that out into the open a little bit more. And thank you all for joining us today. It's an awesome day, Friday. We really hope that you have a great rest of your week. Join us next month. I'll have General Van on, and we'll be talking next month, I believe on the 18th. I'll have a QR code as well after we end the session. If you want to do a team assessment just to see where your team sits, feel free to scan this QR code, take the 15 minutes and answer a few questions, and it will kind of spit out a little bit of a assessment or a grade for you. And if you'd like to have us kind of walk you through that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can get you hooked up with Tim or any one of our other coaches to help kind of debrief a little bit on that assessment. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your month, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, friends.